Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I was a member of a PHA sorority at a large Midwestern university back in 2023. My group of friends and I were not exactly the sorority type, but we had a really great time hanging out together. Sorority life is pretty boring for the most part until my junior year, when the executive board consisted of all the girls that didn't like my friends and me. They didn't like that we went to towny bars instead of the campus hotspots. They didn't like that we were a little grungy with our vintage clothes and Doc Martens, and they thought that we were a bad reflection on the group. Whatever. That year, I was in more trouble with our sorority e-board than I've ever been in my life. I was fined for wearing a denim jacket to formal chapter under the no denim clothing rule that is meant to prevent girls from wearing jeans. That's clearly outerwear, not the kind of denim the rule is targeting, I argued to Megan, our rules chair. She just shrugged. Rules are rules, that'll be $25. I was fined for missing a chapter meeting to go to the hospital with my roommate Jess. They claimed I wasn't excused because I wasn't the one who was injured or sick, even though I drove her. I was fined for drinking at formal, later taken back because I was over 21, etc. It became pretty clear they were trying to wear us down and make life so miserable that we would quit. The final straw came during our big charity event for the year in April 2024. It's an all-night food event where we sell tickets and serve food to people on campus. We held it at the sorority house, and all of the girls are required to work a 3-hour shift that evening. I went and did my shift early along with all the e-board girls. The early slot is really sought after because you can still go out and party that night. I did my shift and left to go do karaoke with my friends at the Rusty Nail. The next day I got an email saying that the e-board wanted to see me. They called me in and claimed that they were going to fine me because they didn't see me working the event and that I skipped out. I absolutely worked the first shift, I told them, trying to keep my voice level. Rachel, who did sign-ups, can confirm that I signed in and worked the event. Taylor, our president, exchanged glances with the other e-board members. We don't trust Rachel because we know you two are friends and she's probably covering for you. Are you serious right now? I asked. In fact, chimed in Brittany, our VP, we won't take any of your friends' word for it because they'll obviously lie for you. Then I told them that I worked the same shift as them and that one of them had to have seen me there. Nope, Taylor said with a smirk. None of us saw you. I'm told that they're going to recommend me for suspension for lying about my philanthropy hours among other issues I've had all semester. This is ridiculous, I said as I stood up to leave. You all know I was there. We'll be making our recommendation to nationals next week, Brittany called after me. At this point, I was fuming. I went back to my apartment and was scrolling through Instagram when I saw one of the girls in my sorority, Zoe, had posted a photo from the event where I was clearly pictured in the background serving buffalo chicken dip. Great! I took a screenshot and sent it to Taylor to prove that I was there. I got nothing back for a few minutes until suddenly I got a text from her. I was expecting an apology, but what I got was so much better. She'd screenshotted my texts and sent them back to me by mistake, thinking she was sending them to someone else. In it, she was trashing me. Look at this idiot trying to prove she was there. It doesn't matter. We'll get her suspended for something else. Maybe drinking at the formal after all, lol. Well, I said nothing and instead took screenshots of those and immediately emailed them to our national office. I included all the bullcrap fines I'd been hit with over the semester, the photos proving I was at the event they claimed I didn't attend, and the idioty texts that proved they'd been targeting me for months. This is Emma Jensen, I typed in my email. I'm a junior at the Gamma chapter and I need to report some concerning behavior from our executive board. I heard nothing further from our e-board about my looming suspension. Our next chapter meeting rolled around the following Sunday, and Taylor and Brittany were nowhere to be found. Our national office sent in a few representatives and told everyone they were conducting interviews into some allegations about bullying and targeted harassment. We take these matters very seriously, said the national representative, a woman named Diane with a stern bob haircut. We'll be speaking with each of you individually over the next few days. The investigation ended up revealing that our e-board had created a list of undesirables that they had targeted and wanted kicked out or forced to quit. They even had a group chat called Operation Clean House, where they planned out how they were going to get us all kicked out or make us so miserable that we just quit. Crap hit the fan and nearly our entire e-board got kicked out of our sorority. Taylor tried to argue that it was all just jokes, but the screenshots didn't lie. "You can't do this to us," she reportedly told Diane during her final interview. "We were just trying to uphold the standards of the chapter. Bullying and harassment are not our standards," was apparently Diane's reply before she collected Taylor's pin. The remaining e-board positions were filled by emergency elections, and I'm happy to say my friend Rachel became the new president. The first thing she did was refund all our bogus fines. The next one is an entitled people story. I work as an environmental engineer, specializing in wetland restoration and stormwater management. After years of apartment living, my wife and I finally bought a house in what seemed like a decent neighborhood with an HOA. I know what you're thinking, but the HOA fees were reasonable and the rules seemed pretty standard when we reviewed them before buying. No boats in driveways, keep your grass maintained, that sort of thing. Nothing too crazy. Our property was about half an acre with a decent backyard that sloped down toward a drainage area at the back of our lot. The previous owners had let it become overgrown, but I immediately saw potential. The soil was always damp back there, and I noticed water pooling after every rain. As someone who literally designs water management systems for a living, I knew exactly what to do. I spent about 3 months designing and building a small retention pond in my backyard. This wasn't just some hole I dug with a shovel. I pulled permits from the county, had soil tests done, calculated watershed runoff, installed proper native vegetation around the edges, and even added aeration to prevent stagnation. The pond was about 20 feet across and served a dual purpose. It captured stormwater runoff from my property and the neighboring lots, and it created habitat for local wildlife. Within weeks, I had frogs, dragonflies, and even a couple of ducks that would visit regularly. The county inspector loved it. The local Environmental Conservation Board actually sent someone out to look at it as a potential model for other residential properties in the area. I was pretty proud of the whole setup, and my wife loved watching the wildlife from our back patio. Everything was fine for about 8 months. Then the HOA got a new board president. I'd seen her around the neighborhood before, always walking her tiny dog and eyeing everyone's properties like she was conducting inspections. She had that particular energy of someone who thrives on finding problems where none exist. Within 2 weeks of taking over as HOA president, she had sent out violation notices to half the street for various nonsense like mailbox colors being slightly off or house numbers not being the exact right font. One Saturday morning, I was out back checking the pond's pH levels when I heard someone clear their throat aggressively behind me. I turned around to find her standing at the edge of my patio, clipboard in hand, with an expression that suggested she'd just discovered a meth lab instead of a carefully engineered water feature. She informed me that I had violated HOA regulations by installing an unpermitted water feature and that I had exactly 30 days to remove it or face fines starting at $500 and increasing by $250 every week thereafter. When I tried to explain that I had county permits and that the pond served an important environmental function, she cut me off and said HOA rules superseded county permits. She claimed any water feature larger than a birdbath required prior written approval from the HOA board, which I had never obtained. I went inside and pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws. Sure enough, buried in Section 12 under landscape modifications, there was indeed a rule about water features requiring approval. I'd missed it during my initial review because I'd been focused on the structural modification rules, and honestly, I'd thought of this as a utility installation more than a decorative feature. My mistake. Here's where it gets interesting. I'm not someone who backs down when I know I'm right, but I also believe in following proper procedures, so I did exactly what she wanted. I submitted a formal application to the HOA board for approval of my existing pond, complete with all my engineering documentation, county permits, environmental impact assessments, and letters of support from the county environmental office. The board met 2 weeks later. The HOA president denied my application immediately, claiming the pond was an eyesore and a potential liability. She said it attracted mosquitoes, which was absurd because the aeration system prevented mosquito breeding. She claimed it could lower property values. She even suggested it might be a drowning hazard despite it being on my private property and only about 3 feet deep at its deepest point. But here's the thing about HOA regulations. They have to follow their own rules too. According to the bylaws, any denial of a landscape modification had to include specific violation codes and give the homeowner a remediation path. Her denial letter just said no without any legitimate reasoning based on the actual rules. When I pointed this out and requested a formal review with specific code violations listed, she got angry and told me I had 2 weeks to fill in the pond or the fines would start. That's when I decided to get malicious with my compliance. See, as an environmental engineer, I know a lot about wetland regulations. And here's what the HOA president didn't know. My pond, due to its size, depth, function, and the native vegetation I'd established, technically qualified as a constructed wetland under federal environmental protection laws. The county had even classified it as such in their approval documents, which is why they'd been so supportive. Constructed wetlands are federally protected. Destroying them without proper permits from environmental agencies is a violation of the Clean Water Act. The fines for unauthorized wetland destruction start at tens of thousands of dollars per day. And guess who would be liable if they forced me to destroy a protected wetland? That's right, the HOA itself. I didn't mention any of this during our next interaction. Instead, I sent a certified letter to the HOA board stating that I would comply with their demand to remove the pond, but that I needed to first obtain the proper environmental permits for wetland destruction from the Army Corps of Engineers and the State Environmental Agency. I attached the county's classification documents showing the pond's status as a constructed wetland and helpfully explained the federal permitting process they would need to follow. I also sent copies of this letter to every member of the HOA board, not just the president. The response was immediate. 2 board members contacted me within days, clearly panicked. They'd consulted with the HOA's lawyer, who had apparently lost his mind when he saw the federal wetland classification. The lawyer explained that if the HOA forced me to destroy a protected wetland, they could face massive federal fines, and every homeowner in the neighborhood would be liable through their HOA fees. But the HOA president wasn't backing down. She sent another violation notice, doubling down on her demand that I remove the pond immediately. She even increased the fine schedule, so I did exactly what she asked. I contacted the Army Corps of Engineers and formally applied for a wetland destruction permit for my property. In my application, I explicitly stated that I was being forced to destroy the wetland by my HOA and included all of our correspondence. The Corps sent an inspector out within a week. He spent 2 hours examining my pond, taking photos, and asking questions. He told me the pond was one of the better examples of residential stormwater management he'd seen, and asked if he could use it as a reference for other projects. Then he explained that destruction permits take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to process, and given the wetland's environmental value, it would likely be denied anyway. He also mentioned that he'd be sending a courtesy notification to the HOA explaining the federal regulations surrounding wetlands and the potential consequences of forcing unauthorized destruction. That letter apparently scared the entire board enough that they called an emergency meeting. 3 board members showed up at my door the next evening to apologize. The HOA president wasn't with them. They explained that they'd voted to override her denial and grant permanent approval for my pond. They also voted to amend the bylaws to explicitly allow properly permitted environmental features like constructed wetlands without requiring HOA approval. But here's the best part. Remember those increasing fines she'd threatened? The HOA bylaws stated that fines could only be assessed for actual violations of approved rules. Since she'd sent me violation notices and fine schedules for a pond that was now retroactively approved, and since she'd done so without proper board authorization for those specific fine amounts, she had actually violated the HOA's own financial policies. The board was pretty upset about this because it opened them up to potential legal liability. The HOA president resigned 2 weeks later after the board formally reprimanded her. Apparently, several other homeowners had also filed complaints about her overreach during her brief tenure. Last I heard, she moved out of the neighborhood entirely about 6 months later. My pond is still there, thriving and beautiful. The new HOA board actually featured it in the neighborhood newsletter as an example of environmentally responsible property management. I've had 3 other families on our street reach out asking for advice on similar projects for their properties, and the best part, because my wetland now has federal documentation and protection, it's essentially permanent. Even if some future HOA board wanted to cause trouble, they can't touch it without facing federal consequences. My malicious compliance didn't just save my pond, it gave it ironclad protection that will last as long as I own this property. The whole situation taught me an important lesson about HOA boards and petty authority. Sometimes the best way to deal with unreasonable demands is to follow them so literally and thoroughly that the person making the demands realizes they've backed themselves into a corner. She wanted me to follow proper procedures and regulations. I followed every single federal environmental regulation to the letter, and those regulations trumped her little power trip. My wife still jokes that I'm the only person who ever weaponized the Clean Water Act against a homeowners association. I prefer to think of it as professional expertise meeting malicious compliance in the most satisfying way possible. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I have been working at this organization for 11 months and my job is great. I just occasionally have to deal with a difficult member of staff. Months ago, my boss stepped in after I voiced that this coworker, we'll call her Karen at this point for ease, had a habit of getting marketing decisions overturned due to her personal preference. Karen isn't a marketer, and when she sticks to her job, does a fantastic job. The problem is, when she had an opinion, she either makes it sound like the rest of her team agree with her, or she bends upper management to get decisions overturned. I will state, I don't hate this woman. I get why she's this way from her previous job history. In the past, she's had to do everything herself and been able to have as much creative freedom as she wants with no need to stick to a professional brand. Now I have started working there, and we are expanding. I've been working on bringing the branding together to make the organization far more professional to reach me audiences. It doesn't stop me feeling frustrated at her actions, and many an afternoon I have spent cursing at my computer as she decided to get creative in Canva or Photoshop. We've spent additional money and time due to Karen, and now my boss hates her. I've put processes in place with my boss to help stop Karen from being able to get away with her habit of almost demanding a reversal of marketing decisions made to approval process. It is because of Karen that our huge radio show project almost got flushed after spending $2,000 on advertising, all because she made a decision no one in the team wanted to take part. Turns out the rest of the team were excited about their potential radio fame, but this set back the project by 2 months, causing my boss untold levels of stress. My boss sees Karen now as her arch nemesis. I don't talk to Karen verbally, so everything is through Teams or is supposed to be through a new request system. The automated request system is lovely, and everyone has found it helpful as it allows me and my boss to keep on top of requests, assigned to whoever needs to focus on things, to also have information to help us complete the tasks requested of us. The processes my boss and I created have been working recently, until Friday. In a group chat, I mentioned to Karen and everyone else in her team about a new landing page being designed. We have a PR campaign launching on Thursday, and it is connected to statistics from the research we've been running. Cue Karen going on one of her normal rants, usually step one of her normal methods of destroying my projects, only for her boss to shut her down with, "We can't use personal experiences, but have to use statistics. This project is also automated, so we'll help take away work from you." It was glorious because this is the first time in writing this has happened. The only other time this happened was in a meeting months ago, and why I do not have video calls anymore. Karen gets very passionate, and the team and my boss and Karen's boss did not like how she was treating me. Only it gets better as another member of staff running the research comes and provides the statistics. For the first time, I'm having 2 people support my marketing decisions in shutting her down. Normally that would be enough, but how later I'm sent a message from Karen. She's finally completed her sample pack for a campaign. It's a little late already, but hey, at least we have it, so I start to check it out. This is when I swear at my screen again. Good thing I work from home. She's decided for a one-off week to create a new logo mixing various aspects of existing brands together. We have a set of branding where we have a typography logo and a matching icon. Said icon can only be used for that brand. She's taken the icon to create a new brand. Brand guidelines are really clear on the use of the logos, and we have templates created with very set typography usage in terms of location, size, font, and color. Trying to be diplomatic and to help her save face, I message asking her where the logo has come from, as logos need to be approved by my boss. We work different hours, so I have finished work by the time I get a response. I was expecting a "sorry I made it, I can remove it," but instead she's done the stupidest thing and decided to step her foot in it. "I didn't think it was a big deal. I've emailed your boss." The email is going to my boss, who hates her, showing that she's decided, despite many warnings, to get creative with branding for no reason, claiming it will help us obtain a substantial amount of leads. Last week, I pulled in more leads than the whole team managed in a year. This small pack Karen has created will not make much of a dent. My boss is going to come back from some holiday off to a full inbox enough to make anyone weep, including one from Karen who's not using the approval system set out, showing she's breaking the rules again. She's also CC'd in myself and her own boss. This is not going to go well for Karen tomorrow. I'm not sure if it's petty revenge, as I did try and be diplomatic, but I could have also done more to stop her getting herself in trouble. Tomorrow is going to probably involve a lot of swearing from my normally very polite boss. It's weird, but I feel bad for her, but at the same time hoping Karen will finally understand not to do this stuff in future. Update. Wow, a lot of responses to my random situation. So update though, it is going to disappoint a lot of people. I live in a country that it is very difficult to just fire someone. I also work for an organization that will not just fire people either. My boss had just straight up ignored her email, so I had the joy of seeing not only the chaotic logo she was trying to unleash, but also all the other things she was trying to do. Turns out seeing the new logo and seeing red, I didn't look at everything else she's created. My boss is reviewing it and getting back to her and her boss later. I've been kept out of the loop from this because it is her ignoring clear policies and processes, but also because it is highlighting other issues higher up too, with how this was allowed to get so far unchecked or so late. This should have been finished and live weeks ago. It was so ridiculous to my boss, she was just laughing at it. She's got evidence of her going off to be creative and being so late with it, all that time she spent on it will be a waste. We have employee protection here, so you can't just walk someone out of the door easily legally. Things can take weeks and months unless it's gross misconduct because of processes I put in place because of Karen, others, and general experience from other organizations. She's not been able to do any brand damage as of yet. She may have given my boss and I extra gray hairs from the stress. For now, the branding is safe. If I have another update, I'll share it, but it might be Karen gets a warning and stays in line, or we get a sudden announcement that she's going to greener pastures with a new opportunity. Also, I work remote, so I will never see any in-office firing if there was one. Update 2, boss gave feedback to everyone in Karen's email with a polite, "Don't use this makeshift logo," and "Stick to the main brand illustration library," and a very brief overview of why. Karen has been swift with a response of yay but no. The main illustrations aren't quite what I am looking for. Logo has gone, but apparently it isn't over yet. Oh dear. Update 3. So after months of nothing, this week has been chaos. Turns out a few of her team have been sending creative work her way rather than through the proper channels. My boss has been having meeting after meeting with Karen's boss because we are unearthing that both Karen's boss and the team lead have no control of the situation. Another member of staff openingly discussed with me Karen has been telling everyone this is what she wants to spend her time doing. They all seem to think Karen is good at it and don't enjoy creating anything beyond a basic Word document. Karen's boss and the team lead have no clue this has been going on. Things are happening, but it's looking like those higher up are going to get in trouble for Karen's behavior. My boss has also been clear that if we find stuff off-brand that has not gone through the proper channels, she'll make sure anyone who has done that will be in trouble. Processes and things are also being put in place, which means that they will lose their input, but we can't risk branding being messed with due to personal opinions. It's been stressful. Karen has put in a request to basically redo a massive aspect of our branding based on her opinion that it is too corporate and she doesn't like it. To add to this, she's put the deadline as the end of November. The request, of course, if being rejected, but I doubt we'll hear the end of this, as she'll either try to go up the food chain or give her team grief about it not happening and try to cause a coup again. I don't think any of this is over, but at least my boss is in my corner and is not putting up with this. Update 4. This will probably be the last update as things are going on apparently at an upper level. Turns out she removed the logo as requested, but not the illustrations. Well, those illustrations she decided to use are currently embargoed, which is why I still don't have them for marketing purposes. She didn't just put them up hidden away on our website, but sent them to another. Things have gone up the chain now because she can't claim she didn't know any better. To add salt to the wound, she put in another request this time, at least asking for approval for her creative exploits on Illustrator. Boss said no and have feedback, so at least she could attempt to make it in line with the brand, but we both think she'll still go ahead with it and take it to an event. There's just so much paperwork now with not only her, but the fact that other people do not have her under control. Multiple people are now in trouble. I've put in a lot of things in place though, so it should at least limit it. Boss is seeing the full extent though of what I have had to put up with as she's trying her hardest to use the request system to try and force it to be seen by my boss rather than me in the hopes that she can bypass steps, but it just means she doesn't get the correct request questions, and it annoys me, boss, further. Either way. It is being dealt with, and apparently harsh and very stern conversations are being made. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Just read the other top post about taking a bank survey repeatedly, and it reminded me of my survey story. About 3 years ago, my wife and I bought our house. We realized at the time that most of the house maintenance was poorly maintained. Renters used to live in the house before us. One of the larger projects that needed to be done was a full driveway replacement, as the original driveway hadn't been refinished or maintained in almost 30 years. Knowing that we would need to replace the driveway, my wife and I started planning ahead for the eventual project. We decided at the time that we would also like to expand our driveway. We are one of only 3 houses in my neighborhood to not have a 3-car garage, so we decided that we would expand our driveway out so that we could at least have a 3rd stall, even if it was outside of our garage. In order to expand the driveway, we had to get 3 bids out. Bid 1 was for the driveway people themselves. 1 was to our underground sprinklers maintenance, as the expansion would move our existing lines. And finally, due to our land not being 100% flat, the final bid was to a landscaper to build a retaining wall in order to create a flat enough spot to expand our driveway. Due to the various companies working on this project, it meant that we had to make sure all 3 companies could work within the same timelines. The sprinklers were simple enough and not really an issue. The driveway people were great and gave us over a month of wiggle room to make everything work. The problem came from the landscaping company. We made them intimately aware of our timelines and explained the scope of the work, and they assured us multiple times that the deadlines would work. We had the landscapers scheduled for the first week after the driveway was ripped up. However, the landscapers never showed up. We called and rescheduled for the next week, and again the landscapers didn't show up. This happened twice more before it was literally the day before the driveway people were due back to finish the driveway, and the landscaping still was not done. The landscapers finally showed up, and I talked to them before I left for work that day, gave them my cell phone and some Gatorades before I left, and told them if there were any issues to please call me immediately. Got home from work to find 0 progress done on the project. Turns out the second I had left, the landscapers packed up and went to another job. I actually called the owner and idioted out his team. I have never been so mad about something. The project manager called me back and assured me that they wanted the driveway done first and the landscaping would follow, and that he personally would fix anything that was messed up as a result. Fine. The driveway was poured and the results were to be expected, pretty brutal. About a week later, the landscapers finally built their wall, and the then added some finishing crap to the driveway. It looked terrible, especially for a brand new driveway. They then sent me my bill for the completed job. I immediately wrote back with pictures and explained that I was not paying for this job until it didn't look like crap and that I expected the landscapers to fix the mess they made. Well, I got ignored. At this point, they had started ignoring most of my communications. Until that is, about 3 months passed, and the landscaper realized I was serious about not paying for their shoddy work. They reached out to me to figure out what was going on, which is when they finally looked at my email about the terrible work and my refusal to pay. By this point in time, it was Christmas, and everything around me was frozen. The landscaper lamented not having a chance to fix their shoddy work before months had passed, and I lamented them ignoring my communications about the project being subpar in the first place. We discussed some ways to fix their duck-up and settled on one that would at least make things look nicer, but would reduce my driveway width by about a foot, a solution I didn't like, but would at least mostly fix my issues. I left for work one day and came home to my driveway fixed. No note, no communications, they just came in and did it one day when they had time. Again, not exactly how I would have wanted it, but it was okay. My wife and I went back and forth before ultimately deciding to just pay everything, swear off the landscaper forever, and move on. The whole project had taken over 6 months and we were just done with it all. We paid the bill and moved on. About 5 months later, just before spring-summer was set to start, the landscaper started spamming my inbox with requests for reviews. This is right when most project biddings go out, so they were looking to boost their online visibility and to get projects for the next year. I ignored the first 10 or so emails that came through before deciding maybe I can actually write them a review. And I did. I wrote the exact experience I had with them, highlighted the lack of communication, the unprofessionalism, the frequent missed deadlines, and I even included pictures. Within a week, I received a Google reward because my review had over 1,000 views. The owner actually called me after another week and asked what he could do to make things right, which I told him that we were almost a year from the original project. Without a time machine, there wasn't much we could do. All in all, the project was kind of a failure. We expanded the driveway, but now it is a very tight squeeze, and so people rarely use the third slot. I now mostly just get mad when I see the retaining wall. I did get a ton of Google rewards for my review, and I hope it saved a ton of people the headache I went through with the landscaper. I was content with letting them screw me over and just moving on with a lesson learned, but they were persistent with their email campaign. Maybe don't ask people you screwed over to write you reviews. Anyway, thank you for watching.